Good evening. Welcome to Give Back, Give Black, celebrating Black Philanthropy Month. I'm Mark Lewis, President and the CEO of the POISE Foundation. I'm sure you recognize some of our guests this evening: Award-Winning Actor Lamman Rucker, activist and author Leon Ford, Community Leader Bill Strickland, and Business Leader and Vice President of Marketing at Ramada Supply Chain Solutions, Holly Cundieff. I would love to hear how each of you exercises and celebrates Black philanthropy. Every August is a concerted effort to recognize the philanthropy of Black communities. Here at POISE, we're encouraging people to donate $40 in observation of our 40th anniversary. For 40 years, POISE Foundation has given back to Black communities, helping to achieve self-sustaining practices through strategic leadership, collective giving, grant making, and advocacy. Holly, let's start with you. Your family has a fund at the foundation, and like me, you've known POISE founder Bernard Jones your entire life. What does philanthropy mean to you, and how do you express giving back?
Oh, great. Thanks, Mark. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion today. I'm excited to be on a panel with this well-rounded and very well-esteemed group of individuals who have a history and a legacy of giving back to the community. To me, really, philanthropy is about sharing. And it's about sharing one's own insights, one's knowledge, one's experience, and yes, financial considerations as well, all for the benefit of those in our communities. And so when I think about philanthropy, it's quite natural for me in terms of why I give to reflect back on my life experiences and being raised in a household with parents who were very committed to their local communities, very committed to our church, very committed to organizations in which they belonged to. And they really dedicated a lifetime of giving back, be it in talent, in time, and yes, even sharing financially with organizations, all so that we could see the benefits of those efforts being brought forward to bear in new generations. And so for me, it's really why I give is really part of the legacy that was instilled in me, it's just the right thing to do, right? And we all have benefited from some aspect of philanthropy in our lives. Again, be it talent, time, financial resources. And so it's important for me to continue that legacy. And also it's very rewarding. I think that's probably at the heart of it is it feels good, right? It feels good to help others, knowing that we all have been helped along the way.
Great. Thanks, Holly. And I had the pleasure of knowing your father, so I know you had a good role model when it comes to philanthropy. Next, we will hear from Pittsburgh native Lamman Rucker. Do you hold any charities close to your heart, and what organizations and causes do you support and why?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a very, very long list, actually. And I say that actually with maybe with exhaustion, but really with great pride, because there's so much work out there to do. And I've had the privilege, aside from just being, an artist and activist, that artistry and that activism has been implemented in everything else I've ever done, in business, in education, technology. So thankfully, I've had access to higher education and all those other spaces. But no matter what, I believe in our spirit, in addition to having had the privilege to be raised this way, similar to what Holly said. She hit so many things right on the nose. That artistry and that activism, I really believe comes from the heart. It really has been a very just naturally intrinsic desire and, conviction to just be involved wherever the need has shown itself to make change and save lives. So for me, it started really early. But right now, even the organizations either that I've been helped in founding and running, or I serve on boards or what have you, but there's so many others that I've just been committed to the work that they've done. And anytime I could be an asset, I'm there. But I started my own organization with some other partners out in Los Angeles, other artists and activists, service-minded, brothers like myself. We're called the Black Gents. I serve on the board of an organization based out of Baltimore called Project Numa, and that's PNEUMA. My brother Leon and myself both are Be Me brothers, so we're part of the Be Me community, based out of Miami, Florida, but again has a national footprint as well. And I also have a family foundation called AHEAD, Adventures in Health, Education, and Agricultural Development. And the primary point of our impact is outreach in Tanzania and all of those particular spaces. The Black AIDS Institute is another organization. Association of Black Cardiologists. There's a very significantly long list. So anywhere that I've seen the need, or where my opportunity to amplify that voice, or to educate people on whether it's health disparity, or again, even my work with Dream Corps, my brother Van Jones, and shout out to my girl Phaedra Ellis Lampkins. I served on that board for a while, and that's all about, again, green jobs, but also equitable access to clean air, food, and water, and other intersections of economic and environmental, justice, and so it's always about eliminating disparity and telling positive, profound stories from our perspective in all of these different spaces. So those are just a few, of the causes and organizations that I'm very consistently and passionately connected to and involved with on a regular basis.
Wow. Yeah, that was great. I thought I was busy. You're making me look bad.
and listen, shout out to Mr. Strickland, because I want to take this opportunity selfishly right now. I'm a Manchester Tiger. I'm a Bidwell Center boy. So, again, having followed his example for quite some time, and a very, I believe, a direct and specific product of the kind of community services and programming that were available to me as a child. I'm very connected to the work that Manchester Craftsmen's Guild and some of the other work that he's done over the decades. But I believe I'm a direct product of much of the work that he's supported or created and implemented over the years as well. So, the cycles continue, man. That's the whole part of this. This is why this is so very encouraging. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's a perfect lead in, Bill. You are known for your giving, especially when it comes to uplifting the community through education. You are the founder of Manchester Bidwell Corporation, which includes Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, the Bidwell Training Center. A lot of people don't know about the Orchids and the Drew Mathiasen Center.
Right.
You have launched, your concept has been really duplicated or taken across the United States as well as the world. And so, why is it essential to invest in the Black community, and what does that look like for you personally?
Well, what it does for me personally is I'm seeding, hopefully, the next generation of leaders, basically, and to a large extent, on what I learned from John Cundieff, Holly's dad, and Bernie Jones, who stepped up in the midst of the riots in Pittsburgh. And instead of talking about riot mitigation, they talked about building assets, recognizing that people were assets, not liabilities. And it's that philosophy that really established in my mind that we needed to begin to move toward institution building, as POISE has done in terms of the asset space, which they've done very dramatically and on a sustained basis for many, many years, when it was not even in the common dialogue to think about Black folks having anything to do with philanthropy. But Mr. Jones changed that, in my view. And Mark really continues that legacy brilliantly, I might add. And I believe that it has become one of the small but mighty examples of how philanthropy driven by a motivated individual can literally set the stage for changing lives in a very permanent way. So Manchester Craftsman's Guild and Bidwell Training Center are my personal contributions to the legacy of Bernie Jones and the POISE Foundation in person. We now have 10 centers open and operating in the United States. We also have initiated a center in Israel for Arabs and Jews that are going together in peace and prosperity. We have just teed up a conversation in San Juan, Puerto Rico to build a center there. And next year, we will be in Belfast, Ireland to do with Protestants and Catholics what we've done with Arabs and Jews in Israel. And so the centers are now beginning to really expand their impact in terms of seeing people as assets, not liabilities, and developing measurable outcomes in all of these communities. They work, they're measurable, etc. And I think that I am the poster boy for giving illustration to the fact that irrespective of where you were born, it doesn't matter where you were born. What matters is what you've done with the gift of life that you were given. And Bernie Jones continually inspired me to do that because I started my center during the riots. And the guys that I was working with had lost their way. And Bernie said, Bill, you have to demonstrate by the virtue of your life that there's a better way out. And thank God he refused to let me give up on myself. And so I'm very, very honored to be able to share a little piece of that story with all of you today. It is a great honor to be able to share a few of these examples with you.
Yeah. So thanks, Bill, for that. I'm going to echo what Lamman said. You are an important institution in the Pittsburgh community. And sometimes I think, people acknowledge you, but I don't know if they really understand truly what you mean to our community. But we definitely appreciate that. I mean, a lot of what you said was like Mr. Jones just talking into my ear. So
yes, sir.
Really appreciate you being here today. And lastly, I want to go to Leon Ford, not at the least, but because I know he can handle his own. And so Leon, you've received international attention for your work in the social justice and healing movements. How are you acknowledging not only this month, but the entire year? How do you acknowledge when it comes to giving, just philanthropy and your involvement in that process?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I would, again, just listening to Mr. Bill share his testimony and really the importance of legacy. I am somebody who believes in legacy, and I have, amazing mentors and, my father, my grandfather, my mom, and my grandmothers who have instilled really a good heart, a caring and compassionate heart into me. And, during this month and, all year, I think it is important to think about legacy and how to make a difference. When I hear Mr. Bill share about his testimony and Mr. Jones, and I'm really close with Brother Cornell Jones, and so he shares stories with me about his father often. The legacy and caring about community is a common thread, and so I just wear that with me every day. I am somebody who believes in bringing people together. I'm somebody who believes in leveraging my story, leveraging my platform and the different avenues of access that I have to connect people to resources, to empower people, and to, be an agent of change. And so, it is a lifestyle. I don't think that, it's something that, you just focus on, during a month. I think is something that, we all should carry with us every single day we wake up. We should think about how to add value to the world around us, and how to be assets, like Mr. Bill said, to our communities. And how do we lead by example and show that? When I look at you, Mark, and how you have been a mentor to me and just led by example, and that has opened up my eyes to the possibilities of being a young person in philanthropy. So I thank you all for your leadership, for your support and encouragement throughout my process.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, like you said, it's I think what's been said a few times here, it's passing that baton to that next generation and making sure that because this is to me, I often say that this is like a relay race, right? This is not a sprint, not even a marathon. It's a relay race, and it's up to us to run, do what we're supposed to do, then hand that baton off to the next person and let them do what they're supposed to do. So appreciate you for stepping up and for being the person that you are.
Thank you.
Shift gears a little bit. According to multiple studies dating back several years, Black donors often give some of the highest percentages of their incomes for philanthropic causes compared to other racial groups. Still, unfortunately, we are not seen as the conventional face of philanthropy. So I'm going to throw this out to Leon and Lamman. Since you both are familiar faces, not only in Pittsburgh, but beyond our borders, how do you use that fame to increase visibility and importance of Black philanthropy?
I'll jump in first. I leverage my platform. I have access to a bunch of high net worth individuals, and because of my story, they want to support. Right. And so I'm always, thinking about organizations that mean a lot to me, that they can support. And I'm also in the process of, working on something very innovative. Mark knows about it. I'm not going to share it here. But, just leveraging my platform to create vehicles that support people like me. Like, my father was incarcerated when I was growing up. I played for the Garfield Gators. And so I have like all these different relationships with, people who are serving communities, but then I'm traveling the world, right? And I meet people that are like, yeah, how can I help? And so I'm always connecting dots to make sure and ensure that people that I love, people that I care about, people that I know are truly serving communities have that access and are being supported financially.
Anything to add, Lamman?
Yeah, so for me, it's been, so for me, it's, I mean, I've similarly, I think, Leon and myself, I mean, I think those of us at least who are aware of Leon's story, the
Looks like we lost Lamman for a second. So we'll see if he comes back in. If not, we'll keep it rolling. So while we're trying to get him back, why don't we shift to another question? And Bill, you kind of talked a little bit about this, but at POISE Foundation, we're inspired by Bernie Jones. He's, especially for so many of us that have been around for a while, he was a core inspiration to us. Hey, Lamman, you want to finish your, I think you dropped off. You want to finish your comment?
Yeah, I'll be really brief on this point so we can continue moving forward. It's using the platform I have to amplify, not only stories, but to show that, yes, we are the face of giving. We are the face of philanthropy. I think, unfortunately, when most people think about a philanthropist, they think of somebody who's incredibly, financially wealthy, So it's a very limited view of what it really means. First of all, philanthropy, I believe, is more so about service than it is about money. Again, Holly started off beautifully talking about how it's really about your time. It's about your inner power and beauty and again, I was starting, with the reference to Leon. I mean, his resilience and the way he's been able to take something that's been incredibly tragic and transform that into something so profound that is moving and changing people and illuminating, so many of the issues that are actually connected to, the moment that changed his life so significantly. So I think philanthropy is much more than just dollars, although, as we know, it takes dollars to run these organizations and to do a lot of the things. But again, back to me saying I'm a Manchester boy. When I think about the people that really had the most significant impact on my life, it was the brothers who were just, Mike from around the corner, or, again, Mr. Strickland or Uncle Joe, or, again, I'll just say, symbolically, Leon's dad, Holly's mom, whatever, the people that were right there at your fingertips. They were our leaders, our mentors that protected us, educated us, little league coaches. I mean, I don't getting paid at all. It wasn't much, but the real, again, the Strickland statement, and we talk about this a lot.
All right in the middle of the good stuff, right? So as we get Lamman back, I'm sure that, in both the case for Lamman and Leon, many of their followers are inspired, by how they give back. They're really inspired to give back to the communities based off the example and the model that, Leon and Lamman show. And as I was saying earlier, here at POISE, we've been inspired by Bernie Jones, right? Early on in his life, he expressed concern for the Black community, particularly young people. He formed Explorer Scout troops, basketball leagues, investment organizations, and a youth program that ran for over 45 years called Urban Youth Action. And those are just to name a few of the things that he did. He raised awareness and raised money for various causes. While working at Allegheny Conference on community development here in Pittsburgh, Mr. Jones founded POISE Foundation. In the early 80s, POISE Foundation began making grants to various Black-led and some white-led organizations directly impacting the Black community. I feel I could go on for hours, and I have in the past talking about Mr. Jones, but at this point, I want to stop and give each of you a moment to just share some reflections about Bernie Jones, or, if you didn't know him personally, what you know of that he stood for. And so, Bill, I'm going to start with you. I think you probably knew him the longest.
Yeah.
So just, some thoughts about Bernie Jones, and you shared a little bit about what he meant to you, but, what he meant to Pittsburgh as well.
Well, Bernie Jones was and is an icon, because I happen to be familiar with the Allegheny Conference, and Bernie was not celebrated when he came up with the idea of creating a Black-oriented foundation. Mm-hmm. Anybody that thinks white folks stood up and cheered the development of that concept is under an illusion. And I know, because Bernie and Jimmy Joe Robinson shared with me stories of the ridicule that he suffered by holding his head up and saying there needs to be a philanthropy that is devoted to the issues of poor people, particularly people of color. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I learned from him is that irrespective of whether or not you're celebrated for your ideas, you are under some obligation to represent those ideas with your head up, not your head down. Mm. And it's easy to celebrate now, but when you're down to your last prayer and the community is not lining up to celebrate your life, that's when it really matters. And I can tell you, because I took over Bidwell during the riots, and the students who were in the program, the first day I showed up at the job, they were taking bets. And I said to the secretary, I showed up here with my Brooks Brothers suit on, and I didn't recognize the game they were playing. She said, oh, they were taking bets on how long you last in the job. That was the student body. So I said, okay, well, anybody that thinks you can run me out of here, that ain't happening.
Right.
And so I called Bernie Jones probably every other week, man. Say, Mr. Jones, I'm not sure I really want to take this job. He said, Bill, you have to take the job because the whole community is counting on you, man. And so you call me as much as you want, as often as you want. And he would buy me lunch and said, get back in that fight. And so he really was a spiritual mentor to me as much as anything else, because back then it was very, very difficult. You're fighting for your life. You know, the students you're trying to work with, they're trying to put you out of business. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, man, I could be in some corporate job someplace and not have to put up with this foolishness. Why am I doing this?
Right.
So Bernie reminded me by his life and the ridicule and the anger that he put up with in order to find POISE. So I had an extraordinary role model. So this did not come from nowhere. That's my point.
Right.
And so, now, I'm getting awards and all this kind of stuff. That's all fine now, but it's the awards that you got in the 60s when, you didn't have two nickels to rub together. That's when it really mattered.
Right.
And it's important to me to let everybody know, don't judge the book by the cover, man, because you never know where those stories are going to take you. And it's that philosophy that has driven my work in founding the center on the North Side and all of the centers throughout the world. And that bulldog determination of Bernie Jones, I hope you will see in me, that's why I have a fire to live, not a fire to die. And that I learned from the master, and that was Mr. Jones.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. That was really powerful.
Yeah.
And Holly, your father and Mr. Jones were lifelong friends, fraternity brothers. I know he was around when you were growing up. What type of impact did he have on you? Just listen to the conversations, understanding everything that he was going through as well.
Yeah. So my father, Johnny Cundieff, and Mr. Jones connected back in the 60s when my father was a detective with the City of Pittsburgh Department of Public Safety, and he worked with an organization called Hill City in the Hill District that was focused on youth and teaching, educating, reaching back, ensuring that youth had a positive, focused direction. And so I can remember probably as I, grew up and became a teenager, my dad and Mr. Jones, my fondest memories of them are probably talk about Manchester and Bidwell. I grew up in Bidwell Presbyterian Church, which is the church that Mr. Jones attended, right? Manchester connection, Bidwell connection, right?
That's right.
Mr. Strickland to Lamont, that's right. And so I can remember probably as a teenager, my dad and Mr. Jones would count the money after church. And it was literally, as a teenager, I think about this now, I was witnessing in them, even though it was the church, they were instructing me as to the value of having a seat at the table. That's almost the analogy I would make. Sitting around the conference room table, counting money. It was after church a lesson of being focused on education. Mr. Jones was very focused on that. And he was very focused on creating economic power, right? And economic value. And as a teenager, probably didn't understand that so much. I really understand it now. But he was very focused on giving back and how are we creating economic value and economic power in our communities. And I think about, as an adult now, I remember too, at the time he worked at Allegheny Conference. And, you know, just the economic development focus regionally of Allegheny Conference, Mr. Jones had a seat at the table, right? He was witnessing how those organizations worked, how value was created, how economic value was created, how personal wealth was created, with sitting at the table with his colleagues. And when I think my point that I'm driving to is, when I think about Mr. Jones, I think he had the vision, to what Mr. Strickland was saying. He had the vision and the leadership and the initiative to say, I want to build a model like this for the Black community, right? It's about empowerment. And that's kind of the word when I think about Mr. Jones. His foundation was, how do we empower our communities? How do we empower our young folks? How do we empower each other? Economic empowerment, educational empowerment. How do you create that legacy reaching back? Think about Urban Youth Action was founded based on working and teaching kids. And so, as Lamman talked about, philanthropy to me is very much financially driven, but it also touches upon learnings and insights and experience. And how do you continue to build that? Just like Mr. Strickland has done, just like Leon continues to do, just like Lamman does through his work. And so those recollections, I think about Mr. Jones and how he was able to build a sustainable organization and POISE in the face of what he dealt with. I didn't even know about that, Mr. Strickland, that there was opposition. He wasn't heralded for doing that. There was opposition, didn't know that. But he was able to create a sustainable business model that 40 years later, here we are. 40 years later, Mark, you're running that organization. It's thoughtful, it's purpose-driven, and the legacy continues. And I think that is probably one of the single most valuable legacies that Mr. Jones has left to us all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'll just quickly say that one of the stories out of the 1,000 that he told me, when I was younger, was the fact that there were people that at Allegheny Conference that basically told him if he would let POISE Foundation die or not start the foundation, they would double or triple his salary. That's how, to Mr. Strickland's point, that's how much they did not want to have a Black foundation in this city.
That's right.
What he exhibited and what he taught me was sacrifice. Because if you think back then, to triple your salary, to let something else go, that's hard to turn away or hard to turn down. But from his perspective, it was more important to build this institution for our community, right, than his own personal gain. And so that was one of those lifelong lessons that he always, resonates with me. And Lamman, a lot of people don't know that you have ties to the Jones family. You knew them growing up. What reflections do you have about the family, about Mr. Jones?
Yeah, for me, there's quite a few memories of everybody involved in that equation, but surprisingly, not a whole lot of actual one-on-one dynamics like you've had the privilege of having for so many years. But to that point, that's why I believe his influence was so significant, is because when I did have that opportunity to meet him or just share a few words or what have you, he always left such a significant impression, not by trying to say anything or do anything profound, but just by being himself. I always thought the name of this organization was so spot on because it really exemplified how he walked and talked, and he didn't just, talk the walk, he walked it, right? And it was just that, it was poise. It was, and that's why the Black Gents is what it is, because it's his example. It's my relationship to him is really through the Patton family as well. So Colonel Patton and his son John and I lived together, were roommates in graduate school. So then my relationship with Cornell and Hyleen and and Mr. Jones and the Patton family and Jones family. So I got to know them on a personal level, and then being informed about the work that he was doing, then it just kind of heightened my attention to him, and hearing his voice, watching his example, and being a benefit of Urban Youth Action, even during my college years there in Pittsburgh, because I was born there, but then I left and went away for some years, and it just coincidentally came back to attend Carnegie Mellon in Duquesne. So when I came back during my college years, after having been gone since grade school, my understanding of what was happening was, at a very different level. So I'm a product of the Pittsburgh Black Theater Dance Ensemble and other elements of the Black arts movement. So this whole each one, teach one, to whom much is given, much is also required. All these things were really exemplified just in the very basic day-to-day flow and, like I said, sophistication and poise and swag that Mr. Jones, Mr. Patton, Mr. Strickland, I can mention so many names throughout my family and throughout the Manchester, and then someone talked about the Hill. My mother's from the Hill, my dad's from the North Side. So anything connected to the history and legacies of those two, legendary communities there, I'm like I said, a product of or connected to in some form or fashion. My grandparents, my mom's parents were educators and journalists. My grandfather moved to Pittsburgh to work for the New Pittsburgh Courier as a journalist. And my grandmother came in from Jersey, and she's, was always at the forefront of empowering women's voices throughout education and the Head Start movement and all kind of other things, and taught in the Hill District for over 40 years, So there's countless men and women like Mr. Jones that have set the example for me. But when I really think about him and the Jones family, like I'm doing right now, I can't help but smile, because it was always a real cool, chill, laid back, his charm and, again, his poise were second to none.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Leon, I know you didn't necessarily get a chance to interact with Mr. Jones, but you are very close friends with his son, Cornell. And I often say that Cornell is Mr. Jones reincarnated. So I just want to give you any opportunity to share any reflections or just your relationship of Cornell and, just the Jones family.
Absolutely. Again, legacy is so important, right? And although I never got to meet Mr. Jones personally, my relationship with his son and the foundation shows how strong his legacy is. Cornell's like a big brother to me. He has, been by my corner during some of the toughest moments of my life. I've taken a lot of pictures for a lot of people, but Cornell is somebody who has been that silent voice, one of those phone calls at, 11:30 at night or midnight saying, hey, are you taking care of yourself? I'm here for you. Cornell's always praying for me. Whenever we see each other or we meet, he's always praying. He's always humble. He's one of those servant leaders. There's a quote that I really like is, imagine how much we can accomplish if no one cared who got the credit. And Cornell embodies that. And so me having a relationship with him and to hear about his father, it's inspirational. My son is right here. He's just walked out the room, but he's been listening to this whole conversation. And I hope that, as time goes on, that my son could become, a leader, who embodies what I represent now based on what he's seeing from me, right? These conversations, like children, that they see it all. When you wake up in the morning, right? When you're frustrated, when you're having those tough moments and leadership where you got to make those tough decisions. So I hope my son's like really, paying attention, because one day he'll be in a position where he has to make some tough decisions that'll impact a lot of people. And so I believe that, from, Mr. Jones's leadership, he was able to, lead by example and show so many people, even to today, right, how to lead and how to really care for community. while being very intentional about serving Black people, but also embracing, those white friends, and allies.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to end this question, because he was that model, right? And everything you described about Cornell, that was modeled to Cornell. And so Cornell adopted that, that model. And again, so many of us who had a chance to interact with him, adopted the model that, that he portrayed. And it was an extremely positive model that showed that he cared about, more than just himself, more than just his nuclear family. And I think that is just powerful, even now. And so it's a special time in the life of POISE as we look back over the history of the Institute, created by Bernie Jones. In 1980, POISE was the first public foundation in Pennsylvania, created and managed by and for Black people. Today, we are the oldest independent community foundation in the country and one of only a few that exists. At the inception, the foundation started with 3 endowed funds valued at about $167,000, and we had little to no operating income. Dedicated volunteers really ran the foundation for the first 16 years. As you've heard, Mr. Jones worked for Allegheny Conference, and while he was doing that, he was still building and growing POISE Foundation. Now we have assets grown to more than $12 million. We have over 200 funds that we manage. Those funds have been created by people and organizations in Pittsburgh, but on a growing basis, people from around the country have learned about the foundation and are creating funds. Over the last years, we have given away $16 million in grants and scholarships, and another $4 million through our fiscal sponsored partners. Last year alone, POISE distributed $1.2 million supporting Black-led organizations and their response to the COVID pandemic. So at this point, I want to just ask your opinion, all of you, and anybody can jump in. Why do you think it's critical to have a foundation like POISE that is for Black people, led by Black people, and very intentional about building the Black community?
Well, let me go first. I think this call is a great illustration of the point, Mark. We are here because of other people who had direct impact on our lives. And so the call for me, this show, is really an illustration that we have a responsibility that is much bigger than ourselves. And it's a reminder that our lives matter. And what we do in our lives could, and oftentimes does, create opportunities for people who are on this call to tell their stories. That's how we create and sustain an oral history of economic opportunity for people of color. We are living poster children of this philosophy. And I'm very, very grateful to have the opportunity to reflect on that with some of my colleagues on this call. It's a reminder that my life matters and what I do matters.
Right.
And even if you don't think it matters, it does matter. And I think we need to reinforce that fact with each other, because the work that we've chosen to do in some ways is impossible. And so I think we have an obligation to cheer each other up once in a while. Maybe we do some version of this call every year just to let us all know that we actually are okay and that we have an obligation to remain okay, because there are a lot of people counting on us, even if we don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're not alone.
And that we're not alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I'm so honored to be a part of this intergenerational conversation. This is what legacy is about. This is what community is about. And it's amazing, right? For me, to be 28 years old, to be, on this panel with such esteemed people, and also to represent Black excellence, right? This is excellence. This is Black Pittsburgh. This is excellence. And it's important for us to acknowledge this, to recognize it, to embrace it, and to celebrate it. And so I'm happy that my sons are here, just watching me and listening to this conversation, because one day he will be a part of this conversation. And so This is what we need to celebrate. This is what, all of our, children, they need to see this. They need to see that it is possible. They need to see that, we can work together to create change in our communities. We can work together and we can be, and create institutions that are successful. This is an example. And so, Mark, a little bit about what I'm working on. This is so inspirational to me. So now I'm thinking about, cool, how will, what I'm working on be sustainable for 40 years? And so this is that example for me. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well said.
Yeah. I think for me, I would say thinking about why is it important to donate? And then I have another comment to make. But I think we all play an important role in helping to ensure that there's opportunity in our communities. And one of the things that I, from a business standpoint, read about and hear about is the economic wealth gap between white communities and Black communities. And I think by us being very intentional and being very purposeful in donating to a Black foundation, Black organized, right? Black run, Black and brown communities are benefiting, and others from these grants. But it's an opportunity for us to really direct our funds and be purposeful and to do our part to start to close that economic wealth gap that is very real and exists in this country. And I think about, the time is now. The time was 40 years ago. Mr. Jones was a visionary, but we're also at a moment in time now where what can we do and how can we do more? Because I think there are doors that are opening, and I see it from the business world and just, the extreme focus. I cannot pick up a business magazine, even the Pittsburgh Business Times, on a local level, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the forefront of efforts of major corporations, of local organizations. And so I agree with Mr. Strickland. This is so beneficial for us as speakers on this panel, but how can we continue to mobilize and to do more? And this is a wonderful vehicle through POISE Foundation to donate now, to give back, because we're at a moment in time where we can really, I think, be catalysts for change, to continuing on the legacy of Mr. Jones and all of those who have work to create organizations and opportunities for our communities, back in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. That's perfect. And I think to your point, Holly, doors open and doors close, and doors don't always stay open long. And so while those doors are open, we need to be prepared to walk through them. And as people on this screen are opening doors for others, it's up to those others to make sure that they are prepared and ready to walk through those doors as well. So it's not just look at the leaders that are out there and expect everything from them, right? This is a community perspective, and we all need to understand what our role and our parts are, and we will be willing to take advantage of these opportunities. So we have a few minutes left, and we do have a couple questions from some of the viewers. So I'm going to throw this out again to anybody. One is, what strategies are being developed to create a contemporary domino effect to reach and teach the next in regards to philanthropy? And so I guess that's the next generation in regards to philanthropy. So are there any strategies out there that are really reaching down to that next generation to make sure they are connected to, understand, and become philanthropists within their own right?
I would say from this conversation, it seems like it's just been leading by example and exposure. And so if we continue to lead by example and expose more people to what we're doing, more people will be inspired and get involved.
I would say that if we could be recruited, much in the way that we're being recruited for this show, to do individual presentations about philanthropy to groups may be very valuable. I think that many of young people look towards us as role models that they can follow. And the more that we are available, it's a game of touching the souls and consciences of people that we come in contact with, particularly young people, now more than ever. And I'm certainly willing to volunteer on an as-needed basis to carry that message forward and be a personal representative of the very things that we're talking about on this panel.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I know for me, and if I understand the question correctly, I believe a lot of what we can do is really just everybody start where they are. I think it is important to be able to do things that have scale and that, where we can do things that are literally impacting. And, we talked about using our platforms to illuminate this work, across, borders and boundaries and so forth. But when I really think about, like I said, even when I go insular and kind of think who had the most impact on me, they're names that most people don't know. And I think everybody has to really kind of just simply choose that same level of pride and power by saying, hey, I can be an agent of change, therefore a philanthropist in my own right, by just making change where I can. I believe if there's something that you complain about, I believe if you see that there's a discrepancy or disparity somewhere and you have a problem with it, that really is opportunity staring you in the face. So, one of the things we try to do with the Black Gents is really help artists as well as be the artists that themselves say, hey, what's going on? What stories deserve to be told? How can we represent Black men, Black culture, Black family, Black history, Black legacy, Black excellence, and in its finest way by just being ourselves and showing exactly what that looks like. But let's also facilitate other people learning how to do that for themselves. Yeah. So, a lot of when I coach individual actors and orators or public speakers or poets, the main kind of through line in everything that I'm doing is, hey, I'm here not to make you a star. I'm here to help you find your voice, Right. And when I think each of us has found a way to find our voice, however, we're an amalgamation of all these other people and all these other voices and all this information that we've gotten and all this inspiration and aspiration that we may have. Essentially, what it really comes down to is, wait a minute, who am I? What do I have? What makes me special? What's my testimony? What have I learned and observed? And how can I take all of that and use just authentically who I am to tell that and give that away, share it, push it forward, and then try to encourage someone else to have the courage to do the same. And I think when we do that, we all actually identify with that same love and power and light that exists within every single person on the planet. But when we operate in fear, we're doing this. But if we learn to operate in love and everybody's saying, hey, not only do I have something to say, it seems very kind of selfish, but it really is, hey, I'm speaking from my heart, but I'm speaking for, others and for something that's bigger than me, and I believe that's really kind of at the core of all of this work. It's like, this right. is what I believe in, yes, but I know I'm representing, other people. So if I do this from a pure place, it's not so much that I'm trying to do this for my own need. I'm doing this really because I'm trying to serve something bigger and even more profound and significant than myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with all the previous comments made. And, I think it's about education and awareness, and how do we continue to teach our younger folks the value of philanthropic efforts. And so, Mark, I was thinking about this. Mark and I know each other from Inroads. We were back in an organization called Inroads.
Oh, sure.
Back when we were in college. And, I'm thinking about, we used to have to go to Saturday morning seminars on, A to Z in terms of business etiquette, in terms of community work, how to, carry yourself, present yourself. This, it almost reminds me of, this could be something similar to what Mr. Strickland said. How do we start to have programs of educating the younger generation about, philanthropic efforts and what is philanthropy?
Right.
Or maybe it's through, kind of local communities and churches, but to the greater extent that young folks learn about it, this is a good question. I think that those efforts are able to continue more. Yeah. And it's not something you learn about once you're, have a job or more established in your career. It's something that you're familiar with as you're growing up and going through, college and early professional years.
Yeah.
Or arts, the arts community. Lamman, you've been involved in the arts community. Yeah. And same with you, Mr. Strickland, with everything that, Bidwell Training Center does, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going earlier, and I think I got disconnected, but it was also just that. I think this concept of philanthropy is, once I have a whole lot, once I've amassed and acquired, right, a whole bunch of stuff, then I can start thinking about how to, be a philanthropist. And I think from day one, soon as people understand that, no, you have the capacity to give, to build, to share, to positively impact, right away, very significantly, even before you've amassed a whole lot of information or money or wealth or what have you, it starts from the very, very beginning. So again, thankfully, I saw that modeled for me, through the artist community that I was literally born into, with the Pittsburgh, ballet, Pittsburgh Black Theater Dance Ensemble, and at the same time, then moving and living across the world, growing up in DC, and then in high school at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, I was very much always at the forefront of our education. Even though we're being trained to be artists, it was still very much, hey, this is an act of service. You come up here on stage to give something away. You're here to serve the story, to serve the audience, to teach, to empower, to uplift, to educate, and it just so happens that your artistic gift and skill and excellence is the mechanism by which you're doing that. And when you do that, again, teach other people how to do the same thing. You can't be the only one benefiting from this. Your responsibility is to give that to someone else. So, I mean, even when I was in 9th grade, I'm traveling halfway across the city to mentor other elementary school kids. So it was like, just because you a broke little high school boy, from Southeast DC, doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity, the gift, the value and the responsibility to pour this into someone else.
If I could just tack on to that one other comment, Lamman, you made about small dollar donations. And I think I saw that somewhere, Mark, in the pre-work for this webinar. Mm-hmm. I think that's so critical. Is people think, philanthropic and philanthropy is large, $1 million donations, and it's not. I mean, it's small dollar donations add up
a little bit every day.
That's right. So it doesn't have to be even $1,000, $10, $20. I think about, and as I saw that in some of the pre-work, I thought about, Barack Obama's first campaign, right? He broke records with fundraising with small dollar donations. Right. That's right. And that really propelled him into the White House. It wasn't $1 million donors. It was these grassroots efforts to get small dollar donations. And I think that same model applies to philanthropy.
Right. You're exactly right. And so often we talk about the power of the collective, right? It's not any individual that truly makes that difference. It's the power of us connecting, building network with others. I mean, you all have demonstrated that today. And sometimes, for someone like Bill Strickland, we may not know who's watching us, right? But somebody is looking at us, looking at that model, inspiring us. And so it's extremely important to understand that collective power in building our community and building philanthropy through our community is just, to me, that's the key and the critical piece. And that's what's made POISE Foundation available to be, the foundation has grown to be. It's not any, like you said, any individual person that has really invested in us. It's the community that has come around and invested in us, and we appreciate that. It's after 7 o'clock. We said we're going to hold you guys till 7 o'clock, and so we appreciate you staying a few minutes late. I definitely want to thank each of my guests for this compelling conversation. Holly, Bill, Lamman, Leon, we're forever in your debt. We appreciate you taking the time to share with us, and many people don't necessarily get to see you up and close, and they admire you from afar, but we thank you for sharing your who you are with our audience today. To the audience, we invite you to join us again on September 30th from 5 to 7 p.m. Our program officer, Tracy Johnson, is hosting another installation of Black Family Matters community conversation. This time, the focus of the conversation will be the state of Black women. So I know you won't want to miss that. Until then, please share this live program with your friends, your family, people you know in the community, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Again, thank you to my guests.
Hey, Mark, let me speak
Good night,
for the group
everybody.
and saying
Much love.
thank you for what your leadership as well, man.
Oh,
You're
appreciate
doing
Yes, sir.
you're doing great stuff, and Bernie would be very proud.
it.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And
Agreed.
we're here for you, man. Stay in touch.
Yes, sir. Well put.